I hold boundaries with love. That's what I told my daughter's therapist. I was proud of it, actually. I wasn't like those harsh, authoritarian parents. I explained my reasons. I validated her feelings. I held boundaries with love. Then the therapist asked me a question that stopped me cold. That's what you're doing. But what is your daughter actually experiencing? What I learned in that session changed everything about how I parent. Because the boundaries I thought I was holding, my daughter experienced something completely different. Today I'm going to share the exact shift that transformed our relationship and why the most loving thing I ever did wasn't softer limits. It was clearer ones, held with far fewer words. But first, I need to tell you what my daughter actually said she was feeling. And it's not what you'd expect. Let me describe a scene you've probably lived 100 times. It's bedtime. You've announced it kindly, you've given warnings, and now your child asks for one more show. You say no, gently, lovingly. I hear that you want more TV time. That makes sense. It's a fun show, and it's still bedtime. Your child pushes back. Now you're explaining why sleep matters. You're validating their disappointment. You're offering a compromise. Maybe we can watch more tomorrow. 5 minutes later, you're still talking. 10 minutes later, they're watching another episode because honestly, you're exhausted and this isn't worth the fight. Sound familiar? Here's what most parents do wrong. We confuse explaining our boundaries with holding our boundaries. We think if we say it nicely enough, validate enough, give enough reasons, our kids will understand and comply. But to your child, every explanation is an invitation to negotiate. Every validation is a sign that maybe, just maybe, this boundary can move. We think we're connecting. They think we're uncertain. But here's where it gets interesting. This isn't just about bedtime battles. What's actually happening is far more damaging than a few extra minutes of TV. Let me tell you what my daughter's therapist explained to me, because it completely reframed how I understood boundaries. She said, "Your daughter doesn't experience boundaries with love. She experiences boundaries that might move if she pushes hard enough or seems sad enough." And here's the part that broke me. She said, "For your daughter, your boundaries feel like suggestions, not walls. And children don't feel safe with suggestions. They feel safe with walls." I wanted to argue. I wanted to explain that I was being gentle, being connected, being the opposite of my own rigid upbringing. But then the therapist asked me something else. When you hold a boundary, how many words do you use? And I realized a lot of words. I explained, I justified, I circled back, I re-explained. What I discovered next changed everything. Research from the University of Rochester found that children actually experience lengthy explanations during limit setting as parental uncertainty. The more we explain, the less confident we appear. A study in the Journal of Child Psychology found that children with highly verbal, negotiation-prone parents showed higher anxiety levels. Not because their parents were mean, but because they never knew where the real line was. Think about that. Our attempts to be kind and explain everything were actually making our kids more anxious. Here's why this happens. Children are wired to test limits. That's not defiance, that's development. They're mapping the world, figuring out what's solid and what's not. When a boundary holds firm with minimal drama, the child's brain registers, "Okay, this is real. I can stop testing here." When a boundary comes with 10 minutes of explanation, negotiation, and visible parental stress, the child's brain registers, "This isn't solid. keep testing. And here's the brutal part. Every time we over-explain, we're not showing love, we're showing doubt. We're subconsciously asking our children's permission to parent them. And children, especially young children, don't want to give us permission. They want us to already have it. Before I share the solution, you need to understand something crucial. This isn't about becoming cold or harsh. This is about becoming clear. And those are very different things. I call this the wall method because your boundaries should feel like walls, not to hurt your child, but to hold them. Walls provide structure. Walls don't need to explain themselves. And walls don't move when pushed. 3 steps. Let me walk you through each one. Step 1. The one-sentence boundary. Most parents use a paragraph when a sentence will do. From now on, your boundary gets 1 sentence. That's it. Here's exactly what to say. Instead of, I know you really want to stay at the park, and I totally understand because you're having so much fun, but we need to go because we have to make dinner and your sister has homework and say, it's time to go. Instead of, I hear that you're upset about screen time, and I know it's hard when we have to stop, and I wish we could watch more too, but we have a rule about, say, screen time is over. Notice the difference? 1 sentence, no justification, no apology. Not mean, just clear. Your child knows why. They don't need the explanation. The explanation isn't for them, it's for you, to manage your own guilt about holding the line. But here's where step 2 becomes essential, because your kid is absolutely going to push back. Step 2, the broken record. When your child pushes, protests, or pleads, you do not add information. You do not negotiate. You repeat. Here's the script. Screen time is over. But why? I know. Screen time is over. That's not fair. I hear you. Screen time is over. You're so mean. Screen time is over. Same phrase, same calm tone, no new information. What you're communicating is, this isn't a discussion, this is a wall. Walls don't explain themselves, and walls don't move. What I discovered next changed everything in our house. The first few times I did this, my daughter escalated. Hard. She was used to negotiation working. When it stopped working, she tested harder. But here's the key. I stayed boring. No emotion, no engagement, just the wall. Within a week, she stopped testing those boundaries. Not because I was harsh, but because she finally knew where the line was, and that knowing brought her peace. Now, step 3 is where parents often slip back into old patterns. Step 3, validate after, not during. Here's the mistake. We validate feelings while we're holding the boundary, and it muddies everything. The child doesn't know if we're holding the line or opening negotiations. Separate the two, completely. During the boundary, wall mode, minimal words, calm repetition. After the boundary is accepted, maybe 5 minutes later, maybe an hour later, that's when you connect. Hey, I noticed that was really hard earlier. You were pretty upset about screen time ending. Now you're not validating to negotiate. You're validating to connect. There's no boundary being tested. It's already been held. Here's exactly how I do this with my daughter now. Boundary moment. It's time to leave the party. She protests. I repeat. It's time to leave. We leave. She's upset in the car. I don't lecture or explain. 20 minutes later, at home, she's calm. I say, that was disappointing, huh? You were having fun. She feels heard. But the boundary never moved. That's the difference. And here's what happened that I never expected. She stopped testing so hard because she knew the wall wouldn't move, so she stopped running into it. Let me tell you what happens if you don't make this shift. Children who grow up with movable boundaries don't become more secure. They become more anxious because they spend their entire childhood trying to figure out where the real limits are. They learn that rules are suggestions, that authority is negotiable, that if they push hard enough or seem sad enough, the world will bend. And then they meet the real world. Teachers who don't negotiate, bosses who don't bend, relationships where no actually means no, and they have no tools to cope because we never let them practice accepting limits as children. My daughter's therapist told me something I'll never forget. She said, "The most anxious children I see come from the most well-meaning homes. Homes where parents were so worried about their child's feelings that they forgot their child also needs to feel contained." Contained, not controlled. There's a difference. Containment is a gift. It's the message that says, I am in charge here. You don't have to figure out where the edges are. I've got that handled. Let's recap. 1. The one-sentence boundary. No explanations, no justifications. State it and stop. 2. The broken record. When they push, repeat. Same words, calm tone, no new information. 3. Validate after, not during. Hold the wall first. Connect later. Here's what I want you to try this week. Pick one boundary that always turns into a negotiation. Bedtime, screen time, leaving the playground. And hold it with fewer words. One sentence, broken record, no explanations. Then come back here and tell me what happened. I read every single comment, and I know how hard this shift is. The stories you share help other parents more than you can imagine. And look, I know what you might be feeling right now. Like, this sounds cold. Like, this isn't the connected, gentle parents you wanted to be. I felt that way too. Until I saw my daughter's face change. She stopped scanning my face for uncertainty. She stopped testing every limit to see if it was real. She started relaxing because she finally knew where the walls were. That wasn't me being harsh. That was me finally being clear. And clarity, it turns out, is the kindest thing I ever gave her. Now, if this hit hard and you want to go deeper, I made a video about the exact phrases to use when your kid says, "You're mean," or "You don't love me" during boundaries. It's the hardest moment, and there's a way through it. That's right here. And if you're rethinking some things right now, good. That's growth. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I'll see you in the next one.